So what I'm going to do now, because black is so powerful, I'm just going to paint all of this blue to start out with. And here you can see again how transparent the paint is, because you can see that white of the paper coming through the blue. And again, it'll take probably 2 or 3 coats to really get rid of that. But again, this is also not a paint that I have a lot of experience with. This is the first time I've used it. We usually get a different brand of paint, and every brand is a little bit different because every brand uses different amounts of pigment that they're putting in that binding agent. So like with oil paint, oil is the binding agent. With acrylic paint, it's like a plastic type of binding agent. The binding agent is just the liquid that they're putting the powdered pigment into. So there's also like tempera paint, in which egg is actually the binding agent. There's watercolor, where water is the liquid that makes it able to be kind of used with a brush. Okay, so now I've got all of that blue kind of laid out. I'm going to go back and try with my dry brush and just try to blend this line out a little bit. What I'm looking for are these vertical lines where I can see a distinct difference. And you'll see now as I start to go over this, it's almost starting to peel up a little bit. That usually happens because the paint is starting to dry. So a lot of times that means that you need to wait an hour or so and let it dry before you continue painting. But this should be just fine for our first go. So now what I'm going to do is get a little bit of black on here. And like I said, a tiny amount of black. Like I can't stress that enough, that it really will not take much black at all. And you really want to have the white done before you start with the black, so that you don't have to go back into that at all. And this is fine for a first coat. Your second coat should clean it up a little bit. It'll get more opaque, which means that you won't be able to see the white of the paper through it, but you really have to give it time to dry in between each of those. And this is acrylic paint. Acrylic paint dries a lot faster. So that's kind of why we use it rather than oils. Oils can take several days or weeks to dry. So I'm going to get a little bit of the black and I'm just going to put it on the outside of my line here. That kind of just lets me know exactly what I'm trying to get to and where I'm trying to get to it. Most people have a little bit more trouble with the black than the white because it is so overpowering. So I have a tendency to wash my brush a lot when I'm using black, just because I really don't want there to be that much black in my brush, because it is so strong. So I've got this here. This is my dry brush. I'm just going to try to bring some of that black over. I'm just dragging it over into my blue. You can also see here where there was a little bit too much water in my brush, but that's okay on the first go, meaning my first layer of paint. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start mixing a very small amount of this black in with some of my blue over here, and you can see how much of an effect that very small amount of black had. So here, we'll probably want this color about here. You can see that's starting to get a little darker. So now I can take a little bit more black. I can put that over in here. More So now I've just kind of put a thicker layer of wet paint on there. And it's thicker so it'll stay wet a little bit longer, which will give me time to get back with my dry brush and start to blend this out a little bit. It's starting to peel up, and that's just because it's starting to dry a little bit. So I'm going to get just a little bit more fresh blue paint, because that will help get rid of a little bit of that. But a lot of these sorts of issues will have to be solved with another layer of paint after this dries. I'll do that quite a bit on my palette just to make sure there's not a lot of wet paint in my brush. A lot of this has to do with how much pressure I'm putting with my brush, how much paint is in the bristles of my brush, and it really is just going to take a lot of practice to get better at that sort of stuff, which is why we're doing this. So that got a little too dark, so I'm going to get rid of some of the paint that's in my brush, grab a little bit of the blue, and just go over some of this. Try to blend it back. So as you can see, there's still a little bit of a line right here. And on your first round, or your first layer of paint, that's going to be okay, because we can try to get rid of that in our next layer. So we'll get that and just kind of try to blur it out a little bit. And that worked okay. So this would be good for your first round, or for your first layer of paint. You would do that for 1, 2, 3, 4, all 4 of our rectangles. You would give it a couple hours to dry, or maybe overnight, and then you'd go back over it again with another layer doing the exact same thing when you come back. Be sure you clean your brushes really well. When I do it, I put a little bit of soap right here in my palm. Then I take my brush and I move it around in the soap like this. And I put a little bit of pressure so that the soap gets all the way to the end of the bristles. Then I put that whole hand under running water until no more pigment's coming out of the brush. That's the best way. Dish soap or liquid hand soap both work pretty well. So this is pretty much what I'd like for you to do. Let me know if you have any questions, problems, or concerns. Have a good day.